communities to continue to benefit and to build their own solutions for water management and water conservation. So with that, let me get us started.
Sure. Let's just begin with a brief introduction about yourself also, Valerie.
All right.
Yeah.
Ritika, is there something, would you like to make a statement before we get started?
Yes. So a very warm welcome to all of you. And we are here to discuss the possibilities of how we can grow our, how we can grow the sensitivity of people about water conservation, climate change, and how there's a huge intersection that exists between gender, water, and climate change. Hence, we all are here to discuss these possibilities, how those can be enlarged. So with that, I would also like to give a brief introduction about Center for Social Research and of our host, Valerie, as well. So Center for Social Research has been working on water conservation issues with a lot of support from Hansel Foundation. This began back in 2012, and we really are thankful to them because they really came to us and we discussed and came on the same page that we really need to work towards building understanding about the intersectionalities between gender, water, and climate change. And since then, we haven't looked back. In fact, we've gone forward and dwelled into looking at various aspects of water conservation, be it water conservation itself, the technicalities involved in it, as well as the water management aspect also. So thereafter, I would also like to share that myself, I have been working on these projects for last 8 years almost now, and for me, they are very close to my heart because I think any and every aspect needs a lot of gender mainstreaming now. We really need to look at every issue from that lens. So with that, I'll open the floor to Valerie. I'll give the floor to Valerie, but with few words for Valerie. She's been supporting us for several years now. She's been leading our organizational development section as a head, and she's been going out and about talking about what CSR does because she really believes in how social impacts can really change the face of the earth. So with that, Valerie, please go ahead.
Indeed. I do work with CSR on all of our partnerships and relationships. I do a lot of program development and pitching, and I work very closely with Ritika in the development of all of our specific water conservation programs. So with that, I have actually lost my. Are we visible nicely?
Yes, Valerie.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's showing up nicely on my screen. Is it also showing up for everyone else? Ritika, is that a thumbs up from your end?
Yes, certainly.
Great, wonderful. So yes, and I am at the end of my presentation. Well done. Great. So we're going to jump right in and talk about how powerful a model investing in women at the community level really is. And I want to start this discussion just with a few key points that were really highlighted during our state consultation last week. A number of our speakers really drew on the importance of investing in women as stakeholders and leaders and moving away from seeing them as just beneficiaries of environmental programs. And with CSR, we believe that, and we back their additional emphasis on community capacity building. So at the end of the day, from our consultation, we concluded that deepening community ownership and engagement and their ability to make decisions and access technology is really, really the heart of creating sustainable solutions for communities. And we've seen from that discussion, as well as a number of our other corporate consultations we've sat in, I remember this specifically from the HCL roundtables on environmental development and climate change, that we're at the point that we can't really look at the sustainable development agenda in silos. Like, it's really important that we create holistic and integrated solutions that look at building capacity and creating outcomes on a range of different measures. And that is exactly what the model that we work on does. So we are grounded in SDG 5, gender equality. We've been working on women's capacity building, leadership, decision-making, engagement in governments. We've been doing that for decades. And over the past 8 years or so, we've really changed that focus to look at that role of decision-making, engagement, leadership and governance, both in climate change, as well as access to water and sanitation. So achieving real sustainable goals in these areas and achieving the kind of community-based, socially inclusive solutions that even that Prime Minister Modi had called for when he launched his second term in office, we really see women's leadership in water, specifically at the community level, as a really key to achieving those objectives. So just a bit about the model that CSR has used. It is grounded in women's leadership, working with both elected women representatives, as well as leaders within self-help groups and communities in Rajasthan. And some of the benefits of this model, which is focused on capacity building, focused on engagement with local government, focused on creating women who can both be sources of information and education for their communities, as well as active decision makers, planners, and movers and shakers of the people who can actually manage and push through the systems to actually get work done on the ground. We create community-owned systems. Building community ownership and capacity is a key to building sustainability in the long run. What's really great about this work as well is that all of our training work is very hands-on. We get our women into the field doing real infrastructure work with real results and substantial environmental impact for both the communities they serve and the environment around them. We also look at the way that initial investment in capacity building, for those of our partners who like infrastructure, the capacity building, I think sometimes we might think, well, why is that necessary? But what we found is as we've built capacity with women, they learn how to access government resources. Like, the majority of the projects I'm going to share with you in this project have actually been, they've been developed using government funding. So we've seen that the investment that we've made in this capacity building has gone on and it's been multiplied by our women's ability then to bring in additional resources for these projects. So you can see it creates really a very strong foundation at the community level, one that is linked with government, local government, that builds stakeholder support to really, to create a system that can create immediate results, but then continue producing results as these women continue engaging in their work. I'm just going to walk you through, because I want to come back down to sort of specifically how we work. I just want to walk you through the process that we use to develop women's capacity and specific infrastructure projects. When we're targeting an area, we always do a very specific needs assessment that is both around engaging with local communities, assessing their knowledge level, identifying women leaders, building rapport, but also like doing a very technical analysis of what the real water management needs are. And then our training programs and capacity building are really built around those solid identified needs. The core of our capacity building program, which has been developed again with HSS's support, is around basic training on leadership development, good governance, the gender sensitivity, and the essence of inclusive water conservation, basics of traditional water conservation structures. So our basic training is really a solid grounding in how to engage in community mobilization, engaging stakeholders, educating them on the keys of water conservation, and then moving on from there, looking at the planning and development process within their own communities. Our technical training tends to follow that and is designed very specifically around whatever specific infrastructure project we'll be conducting. So it helps women take that lead on designing and implementing the actual construction phase, dealing with the government for the kind of permissions and logistics they need, and finally organizing the actual construction, sometimes engaging in that as well through the MG Narega program. These are all ways that women have taken the lead and sort of take ownership of the project that we conduct. Just a little bit more, our capacity building expands to exposure visits. We have been, in Rajasthan for 6 to 8 years at this point. And we do a lot of knowledge sharing with other sites to see how they have been, so women can see how they've managed and implemented these projects. And going forward from here, this handholding and technical support really informs the next phase of our work. So after we've trained, engaged women in these training processes, we stay with them side by side, providing sort of a back end support as they take the lead on planning and organizations. So the structure of this is that we establish village-based water conservation committees. Those committees are headed by our women. They conduct a range of stakeholder meetings to build buy-in and educate community members about the importance of these projects. We provide them with the ongoing technical support they need to be making good decisions and develop a strong plan. And finally, those plans that are developed are ultimately submitted into the Gram Sabhas. They are reviewed and approved, or they are, and ultimately, we build that government buy-in and support for our work. And finally, the last phase of the work is, again, led by our women, the actual construction and development process, whether it's refurbishment or a completely new structure. We work with our women, providing back-end support, again, to allow them to take that lead, learn how to manage and organize, and really create some really powerful results for their communities. I just want to give you a few examples of what those concrete projects actually have been. And I just want to highlight also, particularly in Rajasthan, most of these structures are really, really geared towards improving groundwater resources. We've not had a formal study, analysis of this, but over the years and in contact with our community program participants, we've been getting feedback that they are seeing actual concrete, improvements in their access to water, the ground, the fertility of the soil, and the moisture level within their agricultural land. So we're having a real impact. So just quickly, a few of these, some are mid-buns, which are storage units for water. We've developed a range of coons. This one is an example from our project with Rights in Sanganer. Ponds are another way to collect rainwater as well as runoff from the surrounding hills. These were built in Aravali. This was a project done in partnership with Honda. And then these last two are also great examples of projects that have been sponsored, with our HSS sponsored training, but also leveraging government investment. So the check dams constructed here in Sirohi were all constructed with actual government investment following our capacity building programs. As well, and the same with the trenches, which are just another way of reducing water runoff, also built after our capacity building with HSS using government resources. So I just, again, I want to just note the way that we have worked with our partners. As I've shared, Hans Zedel has been a founding supporter of this program. We've been working with them for about 8 years, and it's been critical to the development of our curriculum, our base curriculum, which gets adapted to the specific context. We've worked with them in Sirohi, Jalor, and Sanganer. And this year also they are helping us upscale in terms of our advocacy and policy engagement, particularly around gender inclusion in the Rajasthan Action Plan for Climate Change. And after our our partnership with Hans Zedel, we've been very excited that in the past couple of years we've offered this program and have been developing it in partnership with two key corporate partners. One has been Honda, the Honda India Foundation, who has supported our work in Alwar, as well as Rights, who is supporting our work in Sanganer. And finally, in addition to replication, I think the Asia Foundation, also a long-term partner of ours, has given us a really great example of how this model of women's leadership can be adapted to other types of issues. In this case, we've worked as part of their transboundary water management project as one of their key partners, focusing specifically on the role that women's leadership and gender can play, using the similar capacity building, planning, committee formation model. We worked with women there, elected women representatives, specifically on the issue of flood and disaster management around the Kosi River Basin. So in conclusion, just in terms of the scope of our work in Rajasthan, we have over the course of our partnerships trained roughly 600 women leaders, both EWRs as well as members of SHGs, and generated 36 proper village water infrastructure projects like the ones I shared, the majority of which have actually been funded through government investment. So that's been, like, in terms of looking for leverage and additional impact from the CSR investments you make, it's a really great model for that. We've served about 10,000 community members through that improved groundwater, as well as expanded education and community awareness. And then to close, specifically also because Nandita will definitely be talking about this, in Bihar, our work included the same model with training and capacity building with 152 elected women representatives, specifically on developing action plans for disaster management, looking at how relief distribution and hygiene and safety in those conditions, and also looking at their engagement with the government on broader issues of safe drinking water, toilets, and access to other entitlements. Also, because in addition to this on-the-ground impact, we work very much with governments in upscaling our engagement and advocacy. That program closed with both the forming of these disaster management committees, as well as cross-border dialogues with leaders from both Nepal and India from the state of Bihar. So I will close here from my general overview, and I would like to open the floor to Volker Plain from Hans Zedel Foundation. As our key partner for such a long time, I'd like you to open the dialogue about what you were trying to achieve and why it was so important to invest in women as a key part of your strategy in Rajasthan.
I think, thank you very much. I think most of this was already nicely pointed out by yourself. But of course, people would probably be interested in what our motivation was in the beginning to start the collaboration with you, with the Center for Social Research, why German political foundation was engaged in this topic, why Rajasthan. So Untitled Foundation is what we call a Quango, a quasi non-government organization that is operating under the federal German development policy. So we're looking also at what India and Germany bilaterally agree on, which topic they would like to work on. And water and generally climate change is something that has been a main topic between those two countries already since many years. And especially SDGs 5 and 6, we have been working on SDG 5 much longer, but never on water. Water was a relatively new topic for us back in 2011, and then in 2012 we started the cooperation with the Center for Social Research in Rajasthan because we knew that organization and that Gender Training Institute. They were doing the research on the ground, as Valerie has pointed out now. So the needs level assessment, the technical survey, but they also had the classical grassroots connection. In fact, they were quite experienced in that area, and this is something that we as a foreign donor do not have. And it was quite new at this time to have the connection between research and grassroots work and between gender and water. I would even go so far as to say that the center was among the first ones to actively engage in the linkage between gender and water. So we were in for the long run, I would say. We knew that it would be a long-term project. Back then, it was supposed to be a 2011 until 2015 project, which we then extended. And in Rajasthan, water is also a top priority, not just because it's a severe problem as it is in most Indian states now, but the government itself has made it a main focus area and thus also a main investment destination for CSR spending. So I think it is a top one uh, priority for all corporates to spend their 2% on water. And so for us, of course, not being a CSR or not being a corporate organization, because we are funded directly by the federal ministry in Germany, for us, water played a role because we knew that it was extremely important for the villages in Rajasthan to come up with their own local water management. We have seen a traditional classical top-down approach, and it was our idea to create a certain paradigm shift in this. Not just a bottom-up approach, but also to create sustainable water management processes on the local level. I'm going to skip some part of exactly what steps we took over because I think Valerie explained that already quite well. So what kind of success we saw on the ground was especially on individual level, on the local level. After the training of trainers, we saw that the elected women representatives in our project area, they had a change of I would say an improvement of their personality because many of them were just elected in that office based on their gender. But after the intervention by us and CSR, it became a role that they fully and gladly fulfilled, and they were able to address problems that were quite substantial to the mostly farming concentrated villages they were heading. So our goal is always long term. So we're not in for any profits, anything, since we're not a corporate. And what we saw was then proper schemes and right incentives for irrigation and water governance. They can only come from the political level. And this is also what the side that we brought in. Don't look just at the local level, also look at the district and state level. I think something we've learned also that it's extremely important to market the success, and maybe companies are better in this field than NGOs. They might know how to lobby with the government for their projects. They are cost efficient, and they can be convinced that long-term gains are there for the jurisdiction of those MLAs or MPs, but also for the image, then of course, of a company. We also saw that local farmers already know that only long-term solutions will prevent effects of droughts or floods. And so this is something where you don't have to start. When you invest in development projects on the ground, you usually deal with people that know exactly what's going on, but because of the administrative structures, they have no say in changing these structures. Of course, we didn't have any. We were not looking at gains for the foundation itself. We wanted to induce a systemic change in the way water management was handled in these villages. And I think we can say that we've made a change. So not only with the elected women representatives, but since they were trained in becoming trainers, they were also there was a certain spillover effect to the entire community. And where we had technical trainings, I think we could also see a certain effect of sustainability. Sustainability is actually, that always remains an important topic for us, and probably also for all companies that would like to invest in this area. There's always the fear that when you pull out, the effects will either dry out over the time or might even immediately vanish. And this is something that we always have to keep in mind when we start a project. So not just at the end, but when we start it. And I think Valerie understated a little bit the effect that the connection of various organizations and companies with each other had, because the network is something that makes a project sustainable. If you work long-term with a smaller NGO on the ground, this is then, they will continue the work because it's their passion. It's what they really want to do. It's what they live for. And if you engage various partners into a project, then nobody wants to be the first one to say, we're now withdrawing our funds. So this actually has a very good psychological effect in creating sustainable funding. But of course, you don't want to keep spending and have no sustainable effect. So when you design a project, it's always very important that you have something like you train people that can continue to do your work for a longer time. You create structures that can work as an example for other villages. These things. And of course, not just this year was very difficult for NGOs. And I think, with rising profits and rising interest also in national development, companies, corporates they will be the future for India's development. So we have to generally look forward to more partnerships between companies and NGOs. But of course, right now the situation for NGOs has worsened. There was the FCRA, for example, which makes it very difficult for non-domestic funding to reach our partners. And personally, I'm afraid that CSR might replace the altruism that these small NGOs have with short-term interest. I hope that I can be proven wrong. I have fears for especially smaller NGOs, but I have also my hopes, because when steered correctly, corporate social responsibility can have a powerful positive impact on the water sector in India and especially in Rajasthan. So if we combine the altruism on the ground from the NGOs and the cost effectiveness and very effective organization of companies, I think we can create a very powerful combination. And water is something where there's never any personal interest tied to it. It's in the nature of the resource. It's something that is very mobile. So you can always create effects that are more than just local. If you talk about river water or water quality that needs to be improved in an entire aquifer, this is something where we see a lot of work still has to be done. but with the effects that we have already created on the ground in Rajasthan, I think this is a very good start for any organization, be it CSR or NGO, to continue that work. And with this, I'm afraid I would have to excuse myself because we have our own event starting in a short while.
Yes, Volker, thank you so much for your engagement, and thank you. You really did, I think, hit some of the points that we wanted to bring up about, where do we go from here, and how can we bring new partners and actors into the network and into engagement with the social sector on these issues. Great, we will let you go, and I want to thank you for your participation and contribution. I'm sure we will have more to say about the network development and how we can partner in Rajasthan. So thank you very much. Great, thank you so much for that. So that was our Volker and HSS have been a foundational partner of ours. And now we'd like to hear from, we're going to hear from Manmeet Kaur, who is with Honda India Foundation, formerly Honda Two Wheelers India, now they Honda India Foundation. I want to welcome her, and she's been one of our first corporates to join us in expanding this model in Rajasthan, applying it to their unique considerations of their villages. And I will let her tell you a little bit about how this model has fit with their corporate strategy and what they felt the benefits have been. Manmeet, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, wonderful. Do you need, are you presenting, or are you just speaking today? Would you like to share your screen?
Yeah, ma'am. I also want to share my screen.
All right. So,
and I will be also explaining the engagement of Honda India Foundation with all the other projects and what we have exactly done for the empowerment of women in the society. I would like to share with all of you.
Great. Shruti, just quickly, are you able to give her sharing access? You have a green dot that says share screen.
I think you can give her that.
All right.
She's under the name PI010.
PI
10803.
P as in tomato. Oh, I gotcha. PI, yeah, gotcha. All right. Hi, so Manmeet, are you able to share your screen?
Is it visible?
It should be at the bottom, would say share screen.
Ma'am, actually, it has been written that host disabled participant screen sharing.
Hello, Valerie, can you ask Nandita to go ahead in the meanwhile? This is...
Valerie, search the name Manmeet itself and then just give her the rights, like make her a co-host, because I can't see her as a co-host.
All right, actually, so yeah, so Manmeet, let me get you sorted with the screen sharing option. Actually, we're going, Ranjita, we will end. We're going to let Nandita actually end our discussion today. But Divyang, can I, can I request you to join us for the discussion?
Yeah, sure. Valerie, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So thanks. I think it's quite interesting subject and interesting group to participate for the discussion on very important aspects of you mentioned. And I just would like to share some of the experiences, not only from Rajasthan, because as a trust, we are not only focusing in Rajasthan, we work in around 17 states through various multi-thematic interventions where water-based livelihood is one of the core focus areas of us. But at the same time, we also do some work on, the drinking water part, because water, we can't look at as an isolation. So the water and women are, I think, very, very close. I would say two sides of the coin, because not only because the 5 and 6, both SDGs are coming one after another. But if you look at it as a society in the country, I think women play a very critical role in terms of the water management. And if we talk about in rural India, it's more prominent. And over a period of last 3 decades, if you see, the women workforce has increased in agriculture substantially. Currently, there is around, as per the data, it shows around 37% women are engaged in agriculture workforce, which is quite huge. And in last decade or so, the out migration, specifically in the male members, has also increased. And I think the pattern we can see that the more towards the urbanization for finding opportunities for income generation activities. Responsibility on women on common property resource management has also increased substantially. And when we talk about the common property resources, we need to look at the water value chain. We can't look at water as only a source, but if you look at the water value chain, the source, storage, distribution, discharge, and reuse. So I think the value chain has a critical role to play in overall development. And when we talk about the, specifically in terms of the water management at a large scale. If you see Rajasthan specific data on water perspective, I think the 84% households don't have a functional household tap connectivity. So it means that the women or adolescent girls might have to travel a long distance to get the water, not maybe throughout the year, but I think at least maybe seasonal part, or maybe in many cases if they have to travel long distance throughout the year. So that's, I think, a huge social cost or opportunity cost lost in terms of the engagement of women. Either they can get into the schools or getting into that education, or actually get into the productive activities. So that becomes one of the challenges in terms of the issues in the country. Second side, if you look at the water security aspects in terms of the availability of groundwater in Rajasthan, out of 246 blocks, around 204 blocks are facing severe water scarcity issues, and they all are 204 blocks, which is almost 82%, are coming under the unsafe category. So either it's overexploited, critical, or semi critical conditions. So this puts more pressure on the communities, and then specifically put more pressure on women in terms of managing the water at household level, both for drinking water purpose, and if they are actually engaged in the agriculture, that might also be having some kind of a pressure. So on the other side, if you look at the areas like Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, where I think the whole economy is now based on women, because I think the majority of the male members actually have migrated to urban areas. So most of the household activities as well as the agriculture activities are dependent on women. So more women spend substantial amount of time on managing all these interventions in that. Just to take you some of our works in Rajasthan specifically, I think the one very important point you mentioned, that if we create a women-centric interventions or women-centric programs, I think you will get a better sustainable development process in place. Why I'm saying that, if you there was a report from the World Bank when they did the social mapping or the prioritization of women and prioritization of a men, the water comes first priority for a women in their list of, if they are given some kind of opportunity or resources where they will spend. And women actually always say the water is going to be the one area where we will spend maximum resources. Whereas for male members, it may come around third or fourth. So when we actually design the program, if we actually look at this dimension and bring the women as a center focus, definitely I think the whole idea of actually engaging with them and making a sustainable solutions would be much higher chances. In Rajasthan, we work in with one of the associate organization of Tata Trust, which had been incubated around 10 years back, have worked on creating a movement on self-help groups, which is very women-centric focus. So they worked on with the government of Rajasthan. They also worked on with the IFAD kind of a development agency to create a very robust ecosystem and very robust programmatic interventions where women have been actually not given responsibility, but also have been given a kind of a powers to decide what they want to do in their life or there for households. So that way, I think the more empowerment part has been given to them. And that empowerment is not only responsibility to take decisions, but how you can also engage them in terms of the financial decisions, how we can actually empower them in terms of a financial sustainability. And those areas helps in terms of defining the future direction in terms of the development process. So that's the larger engagement. But for water perspective, we have been currently working in 3 regions, 3 districts more extensively, Sirohi, Pali and Udaipur, which are South Rajasthan, where it's a tribal dominated area. It's a very high water stress regions because the groundwater availability is comparatively low. There are also issues of the water quality. High amount of fluoride is there in the groundwater. So sometimes it's not also fit for the drinking purpose. But when we started this program, we used these whole self-help groups as our base of starting the interventions. So we did the whole designing based on the need assessment, focusing on women and their priority areas. Obviously, we have not neglected or discarded the male members' inputs, but also the focus in terms of how we create, because we wanted to build the whole interventions based on women-led interventions. When we did that exercise, and then we found that the idea of actually making a sustainable progress, this women actually have to be empowered and trained. And as I mentioned, in terms of a literacy perspectives, in terms of account keeping, record keeping, a better decision-making process, and make them into a collective action. So taking the SHGs into a cluster and then convert them into the federation. Now we have almost more than 12 to 15,000 women in 3 districts where we work in around 250 to 300 villages. All these 12 to 15,000 women are actually as a part of one collective action as of a federation. There are 3 federations, 1 for each district, but those are all linked with the federation. And I think that federation helped them in terms of a 2-way communication channel. One thing is there are a lot of government schemes, there are a lot of benefits available which are not reaching directly to the communities or villages. That comes from the federations. And second, what are the problem statements, emerging problem statements that should come from the bottom-up approach? So these women who are a part of SHGs interact with them based on their local situation, diverse challenges in geography, and then they push back those problem statement to the federations or the development agencies who, for example, like us, we work with them. And that helps in terms of a 2-way communication, help identifying the right kind of a solution, both technology perspective as well as the approach perspective. So how we can actually find out solutions based on a correct problem, which are more suitable to those geographies and culturally acceptable to the local communities. And that helps in terms of identifying the better ecosystem creation. Based on this experience, what we actually found out, there are 3 or 4 core areas, and I think it seems very critical for any development partners and specifically CSR to understand. When we engage with women, we found there is a higher level of ownership. because women understand that this is my problem and I need to find out a solution. No development agency is going to find a problem for anyone, for me. So I think they have to understand that they need to find their own solutions. So the ownership level is very, very high. As we are aware that most of the programs in the water space are linked with the community participation or community contribution. When we do this whole participatory approach, the community has to pay some cash upfront or do some labor work. Now, if we talk to the male members, we found it very difficult to convince them to put a cash because their priorities are different. But when we talk to women, they know that their priority is water is the first priority. Their ability to put the resources into as a cash contribution or a kind contribution is very, very high. And that's why the whole ownership of assets become a very critical, and they become a very integrated part of those ownership process. So that's the first part. Second part, we also realize that there are higher efficiency come into play. We have been working in around 250 villages, and around 70% of all these water user group what we created, the participation in women is more than 50%. So 50% or more participations are women in that water user groups. That's substantially high, which is sometimes it's not very much available in many other parts of the country or in the state itself. So that way, the participation of the community women is very high. So because their experiences and learnings in self-help groups, in the record keeping, meeting kind of a higher efficiency, completing the work, that way their efficiency level goes very, very high. So if we want to achieve some targets in X amount of time, we could achieve some targets well before time because women wants to have that solutions much faster. So that I think is a very unique experience we got it during our work. Another part, which is I think it's transparency, which is very, very important. And when we talk about water, specifically if you look at water conservation element, a lot of desilting work is engage in that. Now, there is a data which I have right now, and this actually reflects that in India, around MNREGA program, which actually invests a lot of resource, a lot of investment on the water harvesting, generate around 47% days from women. So it's closely equal participation. And if you convert into the total amount, there are around 53,000 crore of work has been generated on water conservation by NREGA scheme. Okay. Now we all know when we work on this kind of infrastructure creation, we also feel there is a kind of undercut, and the transparency become a challenge. But when you have a women as a part of your engagement in terms of the record keeping, maintenance of finances, you can see much more better transparent ecosystem. That's what our experiences has been. And I think we need to emphasize more. And I think what Valerie mentioned, if you train women in terms of their capability to, the administrative management, administrative aspects or management aspects, I think they are keen to take a leadership role. There are experiences, if you look at the Gujarat experience, where the women have actually been, the SEWA has done one model 10 years back or 15 years back about creating a women mechanics to maintain all hand pumps in that region, because the government was not keen on actually going to the remote location and repair the hand pumps. But these women mechanics, they got the training and then got some tool bank. They go village to village and then they repair all the hand pumps. So I think the whole transparency part is very, very critical, because they also understand the pain of other women who are facing, because the hand pump is not working, they don't get water for a longer period of time. So that way, the whole empathy part is much higher with the women, and they bring a lot of transparency and the whole passion about actually creating a better life for, the human, everything, I would say, womankind in the same areas. So I think that's another learnings what we have.
Right. So Divyang, so I actually have I have some questions for you on these points, but I do want to make sure that we get through our speakers and that we have some time with our participants to bring up and sort of delve into these issues a little bit more.
Sure. No, I think it's just last points. I think I just would like to highlight
sure.
in terms of what we have done over a period of time, and it's not a single-handedly what we have done. We have actually worked with the collaborative efforts, and I think that's what is critical. And this, I think, this workshop is also important for deliberating on how we can make more constructive collaborative efforts on this area, specifically on water management. We partnered with many foundations, many CSRs, and I think the benefits, what we found, that we reduce a lot of operational cost by giving a different grants by different people. So we create a one strong project management unit, and then actually all the CSRs or foundations put those resources in those pool. I think we will achieve better scaled targets, as well as also make a very sustainable impact on the communities and specifically women. So that's all from my end. Thank you very much, Valerie.
Great. We certainly can come back to that particular issue. So I'm glad to see you talking about sort of structuring how we structure some of those partnerships as well, sort of operationally. Great. Manmeet, do we have you there? I have been told that we have resolved your screen sharing issue.
Yeah, I got them.
Hi. All right. So I'd just like to invite you to make your presentation as highlighting the partnership we've had on water conservation and women's leadership in Alwar.
Am I visible?
You are visible.
And my presentation?
Not as you just you'll hit the screen share, and then yeah, there you go. So there we go.
Yeah. Am I visible, Ms. Valerie?
You are. You can open the full presentation if you want. That should.
Yeah. So good evening, all. I am Manmeet Kaur from the CSR department of Honda Motorcycles and Scooter India Private Limited, which is a 100% subsidiary of Honda Motors Japan and is growing well in the Indian market. At Honda, we not only believe in delivering the best products and services to our customers, but we are focusing on CSR activities for which Honda is known for worldwide. For us, it is always principle before profit and people before business. Here, in line with Honda's vision, striving to be a company which society wants to exist, we have undertaken several CSR projects in various states which have immensely benefited the community and enhanced the quality of life. We have taken various CSR initiatives across India for improving facilities like support in education, healthcare and sanitation program, environment, promoting road and traffic safety, rural development, and the main one, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao Yojana. Education is one of the major pillars under our CSR program. And so far, we have covered more than 3.5 lakh beneficiaries, which are women and girls from more than 200 schools. To name a few projects under education are, firstly, I want to tell something about our project Unnati, where we have skilled up and transformed lives of 300 girls from 4 villages in Manesar, Haryana. And there is a very wonderful project which we have done with the Army War Widows. Here we supported 60 war widows, which helped them to earn their livelihood. And in association with Center for Social Research, we were engaged with Ms. Ranjana Kumari ma'am, where we have trained and placed 100 women as security guards in various industries, malls and bank. And we were also associated with the project Harit Udan, where we have covered 75 villages in which 153 families get benefited and 1 lakh ultra high density fruit bearing trees in 32 hectares of land by latest farming techniques and drip irrigation. Our main target in that project was the single women's, or the single women's, either their husbands are no more, or we can say they are divorced, which really help them in enhance their life to live a proper life by earning through that plants and by selling them in the various villages and marketers. We are also in association with Visan Foundation for the project Hospitality Management, where we have supported 180 80 children from the Northeast and place them in renowned hotels like Hotel Taj, Radisson Hotels, and Oberoi, etc. Again, we were so pleased with that project. So again, in association with that, we are again supporting 70 more students. Um, Now I would like to share my experience with Center for Social Research. Uh, this association constitute a self-help group of women in Kali Khol village of Rajasthan and taken up various water conservation projects. Hello.
Sorry, are we okay?
Yeah, what was that? So in first phase, 20 women have taken up 30 projects. As this project self-help group in village Kali Khol gave us too much of positive feedback and had enlightened the life of rural women in Alwar, Rajasthan. So in continuation, we are again associated with Center for Social Research for the betterment of the village women. We have also supported special talents and well-known personalities like Ms. Deepa Malik and Ms. Shivangi Pathak, who is a 16 years old girl from Hisar, Haryana, for climbing Mount Elbrus expedition. Sorry, I forgot to share the screen. These are the projects. Sorry, really sorry, Valerie. This is the first project. I was talking about the project Unnati. You can see that we have just focused on the women's, and the second project was the army widows, which was a very wonderful project. And here also our main focus was women. And this was a project which was done by Center for Social Research. Here we have trained 84 potential girls. And this is the project of hospitality management, where we have skilled up 180 students. As I mentioned, that we are again associated with them. So we are again, this is the project Go Green campaign Hari Tudan. This is a fruit. This project actually bear high density fruits. And it has covered 153 families so far. This is the project Ejo Mark. Here also we have just focused on women's, and this lady we all know, Ms. Deepa Malik, and we have also supported them in her training expenses of Asian Para Games 2018, which was held at Indonesia. And she is Shivangi, the mountaineer from the woman mountaineer who has climbed Mount Elbrus. So now now in continuation, Honda is coming up with a unique program, Sapno Ki Udan, for women empowerment. We will continue this project by extending support to one candidate from each state, Haryana, Rajasthan, Karnataka, and Gujarat. The selected female candidate shall undergo the training in reputed flying school and get licensed to fly commercial planes. Now I would really want to thank Ms. Valerie, who let me to be a part of this webinar and let me to share my views. I really want to thank Ms. Ritika Bhatia, who had always been a best supporter and let us understand what exactly happening at the project. And she always have been sharing all the minor and major activities with us. We really appreciate Miss Valerie and Ritika's hard effort. And this project of water conservation set an example for all the villages. And at last, I really want to thank Miss Ranjana Kumari, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving me opportunity to speak in this session. Okay, that's all from us, Honda.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Manmeet. Great. So we will close our panel discussion with Nandita Barwa. Nandita, I invite you to open up and you can share a little bit about your work on the Transboundary program and our partnership in that space and what you saw from this kind of model.
Sure. Thank you, Valerie. I think, thank you again for inviting me to speak at the seminar. I just want to begin by saying that I think one of the things that's critical to remember that, you know, when we deal with any natural resources, whether it's water or it's forest or it's issues related to environment, gender is at the center and heart and should be at the center and heart of the issue. With specifically, you know, when we are looking at water, and I think when we were working with CSR and as we also work with other partners in India and in South Asia, there are a few things that I would like to put on the table. One, I think, where do women come in when we talk about access to water, okay? And why is it important to have women when you're talking about access to water? Who has access to water? How do you have access to water? You know, how can you access water easily? All these questions have a central need to really focus on women as a key character, a key recipient, a key decision maker, a key interlocutor when we are talking about access to water. Second thing is management of water, management and usage. So it's linked. Once you have access, you also need to be able to manage water, you know, and to make sure that the water bodies from which you are accessing water are maintained, kept, preserved in a way that it's a lifetime resource, not just for one generation, but for many generations to come. We tend to forget that water is finite. You know, we tend to think it's an infinite resource, and it is not. And we are seeing globally how it's becoming more and more critical, even at the highest level of nation states, how water is becoming a contentious issue. Our experience, and I think this is a learned experience that we also had when we were working with CSR, was that most people approach water and water management from a very contentious point of view. I will give it to you, I won't give it to you. You have access, you don't have access. You can have it, you can't have it. It's as if there is a set of people or a set of body who would like to control water. And that gets amplified even at the higher level of nation states. And so that is at the detriment of the other set. So if we are just looking at, say, a water body, if men, for example, decide that it's something that men are going to control, they're going to decide who's going to get water, when it's going to be released, how much water will go for agriculture, then it will be at the detriment of the other segment of the society of women who need water equally and any other. I'm sorry, somebody has their mic on. So can the host tell the speaker to switch off the mic? I'm not sure who has it on, but somebody does have their mic. Everybody, okay, I'm unmuting myself. All right. So I think, you know, I just want to continue in that vein. And in that whole process of who controls water, who has access to water, you know, who manages water, it's largely been a, you know, male domain. It's now that we are realizing, and when we also work with CSR and others, is that how do you bring women to the center of this discourse? How do you ensure that when we are talking of access, when we are talking of management, when we are talking of usage of water, the role of women is central, not just in deciding, but also in the long term in managing conflict that arise around water. You know, water conflicts happen at the smallest level, at the village, at the pump, at the water pump, at the pond, the river, the nation state, you know. So having a gendered voice becomes critical, because then you realize that, you know, you bring in a balancing voice to make that resource equitably accessible. Two reasons why it's important, and especially when we look at, you know, water-related disasters, whether it's scarcity or it's flood, whether it is a drought or whether it's a flood. In both cases, the ultimate responsibility for survival of the family, when I look at family, children, elderly care, falls on the women. If she doesn't have a say in how to manage that disaster, if she doesn't have a say and who gets what post a disaster, access to clean water, habitation, sanitation, relocation. If she doesn't have that say, an entire family can be very unjustly impacted, given the fact that we in our countries are already divided along class, caste, and economic lines. So keeping women without ascribing any other entity to her except that of her gender is critical to water management. And I think that was something with CSR, when we worked with the panchayats, when we worked with the community, it was important. And I think it was giving that ability to the women to negotiate on behalf of the community, on behalf of herself, on behalf of the village, the family, to be able to negotiate around water issues, conservation or crisis, both disaster or, positive reclamation of water or conservation. And I think that has been central to our thinking and our working. And I do think that in the program that we did with CSR in Bihar, it became very clear that women become very good negotiators of resolving any kind of conflict around water. Women become very good advocates to push for a more equitable way of managing and accessing water. Women, if you train them, can provide leadership even in terms of management, not just of smaller, man-made water bodies that we create, bunds or ponds, but also of naturally flowing rivers, whether we are talking about damming them or we are talking about levees. When they have a voice, they have a very strong culturally and socially imbibed understanding of the environment in which a water body operates. They have a very strong sense of, the rootedness of how water has been over the centuries used, abused, managed, and therefore become very, very good advocates once you train them to be able to advocate in an environmentally sustainable, meaningful way with, governments or communities or whoever is on the table negotiating that. I think it's also preparing women to respond early to disaster. We have also seen always that, whenever there's a water disaster or there's a flood, the fatality or the rate at which women get affected is very high, but for a variety of reasons. One, she's straddled with trying to pick up the 2 or 3 kids that she has and has to run as the floods come in. She's morally obliged to make sure that the elderlies in the house are taken. Her attire makes it difficult for her to sometimes run and escape fast in our part of the world, in South Asia. All of those are hindrances. And also because, technically it's something that I think it's imbibed, right? It's just that whenever there is a disaster, and I've had the misfortune of living through one in Nepal during the earthquake in 2015, you did found that women actually risk their lives much more to save other members of their family. Now, in disaster preparedness with water, we feel that if you can train women in early warning, they become very, very good interlocutors in the community to inform others. If you can help them to recognize a flood is coming, if you can help them to recognize the signals the managements and the scientific community are sending out that there is a flood, getting a message, whether it's an SMS, and we've seen that in Bangladesh, it's working out when you train them. Any other kind of mechanisms that a state or the government is putting, if you put women at the forefront of expanding and amplifying that message on a disaster, it works much better and faster. So for all of these reasons, I think that it is important that we work with women at the center of water management. Now, there was a question of why corporate. Now, let me put it that way. Water, it's a finite source, and I think we should all start admitting it's soon drying up. We've seen a lot of our water bodies just drying and dying globally. Why is water central? Water is not just central to households and women. Water is central to any kind of industrial growth, any kind of production activity, whether you are producing an FMCG good or you're producing a computer chip or you're producing any other high-end technology or steel. Water is at the center of it. It is in the interest of the industrial and corporate houses to make sure that this finite resource is managed in a way that it creates a long-term sustainability and a holistic environmental balance, so that their own industrial aspiration and growth, I'm not even talking philanthropy, their own industrial aspiration and growth is critical to the survival of water and water bodies. And what better way to make that happen than to engage with communities towards doing it and put women in leadership to do that. I think that, it's an absolute win-win if corporates invest in that. It's pure economics to me. It's not philanthropy or social work. It's pure economics to me. Industry needs to grow, steel needs to be made, computer chips need to be made, FMCG goods need to be made, water is needed. You have no water, you don't have much of an industry happening. So even from that point of view, I think it's high time that industrial groups, corporates come into this in a big way and think of this as a collective, investment for everybody. So with that, I'm going to stop because it's been a, lot of discussions, and I'm sure there will be questions, and I'm happy to take more. And I do want to thank CSR for the work you did in Bihar, because we were able to then take some of the lessons from that, move it to other areas in Gorakhpur, where we started training women leaders and created it actually, a gendered discourse around cross-boundary water management, taking it both to Nepal and India. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nandita, and thank you all. Thank you all for a great touching on the values of women-led investment development, as well as how corporates and businesses actually do need to join. Many are thinking about these issues, and we want to steer, from our perspective, steer towards thinking about this as one of the central ways that you can build these community systems. And great, thank you, Manmeet, Divyang, Volker, while he's not here. I would like now we're running a little short on time, so I definitely want to just open the floor to our participants. If you have specific questions that you'd like to bring up with our panelists, as well as anything on your perspective, particularly I would say on partnerships for increasing investment in this kind of community-based work. I'm going to suggest you just start speaking. I don't think I see hands at the moment, so just you can open your mic and join in. Give you a minute. Well, if we're if we're not full and brimming of questions, I would like to pose a question, actually to come back to Divyang's closing point. I know you were talking a little bit about sort of how you saw the structure of working with corporates, or putting together kind of like portfolios. I wasn't sure if you were talking about portfolios of your funding partners or portfolios of your projects. I was just hoping if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on that. Have we lost Divyang?
Yeah, no, I'm there.
There you are.
Hi,
there you are.
Yeah, I've just put my video off. Apologies for that. But yeah, okay. So this collaborative efforts are in two ways we do. One is a co-funding. So co-funding is because we know that we have some priorities in specific areas and specific themes and sub-themes, and water is one of the priority areas for us to work. So we try to see that we design the program, but we also look at the like-minded institutions or foundations or CSRs if we would like to co-fund the program, so that because we have a strong ground experience, we do have a very strong ability to implement the program, and we have a very strong, the whole knowledge base over a period of last 2 to 3 decades. And over and above the good relationship with the local administration and the government. So the one partnership is broadly to, doing a brick and mortar and implement the program on ground. So that's the first area where we look at the co-funding, but at the same time co-create the program with the other foundations or CSRs to implement the program. There are around 5 CSRs who have been engaged with us specifically in Rajasthan, but many other, like another 12 CSRs who have been working with us in other parts of the country on the water management aspect. So that's the one way we do. Second role we play as a part of a knowledge partnership. And now the knowledge partnership is basically focusing on creating an advocacy platform and work with the government very closely, because we know we all have a finite resources, but we have a very good experiences and proof of concept available. So how can we use this proof of concept and infuse these ideas into the mainstream ecosystem of the government? So we have to work with the government very closely. So we used to, we build a platform. We work with many like-minded institutions, starting from the smaller NGO to the bigger foundations. If we come together and then advocate with the government, I think that has a much more better ability to influence their policy decisions. So that's the another way where we do our knowledge partnership. And the third knowledge partnership is in terms of identifying a new ways or innovative ways to contribute into the water sector at a large. So currently we are working with some organizations to create the digital maps for a community to use for creating their DPRs or detailed project reports for water harvesting structures, because they need to actually follow some specific engineering skills or a scientific skills. But if we don't have those skills, how we can infuse those technologies into the implementation. So that way we are trying to work with academic institutions, some of the institutions who are in the innovation space, and create some kind of innovative operating models on ground. So that's the third level where we do the partnership. So that's the area where we focus on in terms of collaborative efforts and work through collectives. Over to you, Valerie. I hope I have answered your question.
You did. Actually, that's actually quite a lot of ways that you're engaging, and we're very obviously we're looking at ways that we can build deeper partnerships and leverage more resources together. And we're very excited to have you on this panel and to be able to obviously we will be talking a bit more about sort of our joint agenda, particularly in Rajasthan. Rutika, I just want I mean, the floor is open for questions. Is there anyone else who'd like to dig in or make a comment?
Well, there are questions in the chat box, Valerie.
Oh, okay.
So there is a question which I think is open for all the speakers to answer, that what are the challenges that you face when you have to work with women? Nandita ma'am, would you like to go in for this one?
Sure, I can. The first challenge, of course, in any community when you enter to work with the community is getting the community to agree to provide the leadership on water management to the women and agree to, and that's because it's so controlled by largely people in power who, because given the systems happen to be men. But I think once you have the community buy-in, it's really not very difficult. They're more than willing, because for them, that's a central part of their basic needs and livelihood issues. It relates to their home economics as well as their livelihood economics. So it doesn't become, it becomes much more simpler and easier to then start working with them. But the initial entry is where it's difficult. So if you already have an organization which has a base in communities that you want to work with, and is working on some kind of an program, it doesn't have to be water specific, but any other program, development program or issue, it becomes, to make that inroad and break that barrier becomes much more easier. And you also have to be sensitive to the fact that when you are designing a program with women, you have to do it keeping in mind her needs and priorities, because simply because you're going to train her as a water resource controller or a leader, it doesn't mean that suddenly her family will abdicate her from doing the other things that they expect her to do. So you'll have to design your training keeping in mind the timings. You have to make sure that you bring in women, from different groups and stratas of the society within that community. You need to make sure that you also have age in consideration, younger women plus older women, so that you have different voices of women with different needs. It's also, women's not one linear group, remember that. So while you're trying to include gender, you also have to be inclusive within that gender, So making sure, and if you have these things checked, I think it's not difficult at all.
Yeah, I just would like to add to Natasha's point. So I think the whole process of actually the implementation, and one of the challenges what we face and we would like to address, that this whole is a process-driven approach. It cannot be achieved in a shorter period of time. So sometimes the patience in terms of the engagement with the communities, specifically women, would take time. So I think you need to look at a longer-term strategy, maybe around 2 to 3 years minimum, to look at some results and impacts on ground. And if you want to really look at the sustainability on this. So I think what we find as a challenge sometimes, because everyone would like to achieve some targets in a smaller duration, we need to understand this whole process is very, very critical. And once you create a very strong processes at the start of the program, I think your sustainability will be much, much longer. And second, I think we also need to, understand and take a cognizance of it that the world change every, some time after the needs are changing. So we need to keep that into that resilience part need to be built up as a part of an ecosystem. Otherwise, if we see that, okay, we have found a solutions to problem, and maybe once we find a solution to a problem, your problem gets changed. So you need to look at how you create those resilience system within the community so that they can find their own solutions, even if we are not present to support them. So that's, I think, the two areas of challenge what we have observed, and we try to see it to work on based on our, we create a design based on those challenges.
Valerie, you are on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to cut. There are a couple questions in closing. We can just make sure we get to. I've seen Diana Bao. I've seen you've was asking about how we select women leaders and some of the standards for selection. And I also see another question about sort of standards and best practices in sort of measuring change. Ritika, do you want to just quickly, do you want to talk a little quickly about how we select leaders and what we look for if there's a screening process?
Yeah, so basically Center for Social Research, when it comes to selecting our participants, so we have basically we follow a ratio format in the sense that we see that some of the, which is more of a 40-60 ratio, where we see that 40% of the participants are have had some kind of a basic trainings, or they've been associated with some organizations, so that when they come in our trainings, they can support the rest 60% also, that who has not had a chance of going to the trainings or receiving any kind of trainings, because then you get a mixed group of participants. So be it working with self-help group women or with elected women representatives, I think this is the key. You need to have mixed group, so that you have better engagement when you undertake any kind of trainings. Also, we take support from our local partners, because we operate on a model where we partner with the local partners, and because they have a lot of field experience and they've been working at the grassroots level for a long time, they do have a good connection at the field. So, and with the dialects, because in Rajasthan, go to any, the moment you step a kilometer ahead, the language, there is a shift or a change in the dialect. So that also really helps us. So these few things we do keep in mind.
Great, wonderful. And any final comment on the question about best practices in measuring change at the community level? Well, Ritika, in terms of our leadership capacity and knowledge, knowledge development, we definitely do knowledge and skills assessment. As I've shared, we do a full needs assessment, and our training is targeted and based on that. Also, followed up with, surveys to measure, knowledge acquisition. But then we've also looked at, we've been, looking at the implementation of the work on the ground, as well as what we're receiving in terms of reports back and actually seeing changes in the water table, better access to the kind of resources that they're looking at. Ritika, is there anything else you'd like to say about either on improved water resources and or women's actual leadership capacity.
So just 2 points that I would like to add, which is number one, that when we go into the fields, we would want more support from the partners, in the sense that it has to be a systematic support. We should not just aim at looking at the kind of infrastructures that we are building, not just the quantity of infrastructures, but also the quality of the number of people we have trained, and how, and the level of understanding which has improved. That also has to be looked into and acknowledged. So this is one thing which has been one of the major challenges that we face when we really concentrate on a lot of infrastructural building and just counting the numbers part. So this is the most important point. And apart from that, I think a long-term perspective is something that we all really need to work around, because just thinking of a 1-year plan or a 2-year plan will not sustain. And in fact, just working aloof from the government will also not work. This is the time that we really need to, everyone needs to come together, all the stakeholders, so that we can have better improved plans. That's about it. Thank you, Valerie.
Great, thank you for that. So we're running a little over. I just want to close actually today with a call to action to everybody who is on this particular call. As an active network leader in Rajasthan, I want to invite you, as well as potential funding partners and corporate partners. There's a number of ways that you can get involved with our work on the ground. We are planning and have a plan to be expanding our work in Rajasthan with the goal of bringing it to about 10 additional districts, looking at implementing this program in probably 400 villages, and really upscaling the level of outreach and the numbers of communities that we serve. Now, we really envision doing that in partnership with agencies and corporates that are working on the ground, that really already have a vested interest in their communities in Rajasthan. So as you've seen, we've worked with a range of corporates. We understand their funding priorities and their interest in mobilizing support for their areas of operation, for that very grounded focus on concrete results. I hope today we've kind of highlighted how this kind of women-focused and community-based work really is very well aligned with that kind of approach. We offer opportunities for sponsorship of this kind of model. We can work in communities across Rajasthan. As you've seen, we're very adaptable, and we take a very targeted approach to the needs of the local communities. We love that. On the business side, from my end, I also feel that on the corporate side, contributions to knowledge and curriculum development, as well as access to technologies. We've been working primarily in this region, specifically on water conservation infrastructure, but we see these community platforms and the planning skills that we've been developing as really a way to help leverage other types of environmental initiatives. So we'd really love to engage you with the women that we've been working with for 6 years so far, and looked at ways that we can, bring them on board with, sustainable energy, other types of sanitation technologies. And I think that's something that, knowledge partners in the corporate sector really have a lot to contribute to. For our full network, I know there's quite a few of you who are already in our network, but you're welcome to engage in our advocacy and our communications work. We do host a range of capacity building and knowledge sharing, as well as policy-focused dialogues where we bring stakeholders together from across the state. That is something we're looking to expand and really be engaging cross sectors in those discussions as well. And finally, there we go. I think Lakshita has kindly shared, obviously our newsletters and our website and all of our social media handles. We have handles and streams that are specifically dedicated to our work on climate change and water conservation. So we really invite you to reach out and connect with us. And we look forward to building additional partnerships across Rajasthan. Thank you, Nandita, Divyang, Manmeet, and Volker for all of your contributions, and to all of our participants. With that, I'll close, unless there's anything else.
Thank you, Valerie, and thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care, everyone. Good night.